Despite all of Toho's efforts, Godzilla Final Wars severely underperformed at the box office, causing them to announce that the series would be placed on hold for at least 10 years. Soon after, though, Yoshimitsu Banno, the writer and director of 1971's Godzilla vs. Hedorah, acquired the rights from Toho and began shopping around his idea for a 3D Godzilla short film. Eventually, the idea grew into a feature-length film, and the rights to Godzilla found its way into the lap of Warner Brothers and Legendary Pictures, who announced their intention to reboot Godzilla into the modern era while remaining faithful to the concept of the character. To accomplish this, they hired Gareth Edwards, an independent filmmaker who had made a splash with a genre film of his own, to direct. And so, just in time for his 60th anniversary, a second American-produced Godzilla film smashed its way into theaters, once again simply titled Godzilla, with the hope that it would breathe new life into the now 60-year-old franchise. On the day of his dad's birthday, young Ford Brody loses his mother to a power plant meltdown. 15 years later, Ford, now enlisted in the Navy, returns to his family only to be immediately torn away by the arrest of his father in Japan, who is convinced that the meltdown was no accident, but was instead the result of some unknown massive creature whose presence is being covered up by the government. Just in time, the long-dormant creature, dubbed Muto, hatches, as does its mate, sending the world into a tailspin of chaos and destruction. As mankind desperately tries and fails to subdue the beast, another giant creature, an ancient alpha predator named Godzilla, rises from the ocean to hunt them down. While Ford makes it his mission to get back to his family, Godzilla takes the fight to the Mutos, leaving humanity's survival in nature's hands. 16 years after the US's first attempt to introduce Godzilla to mainstream Western audiences, Godzilla 2014 feels like an apology, a film that goes out of its way to get Godzilla right in all the ways the former got it wrong. Structurally, it is very much a classic Showa-era Godzilla film, where a monster appears to threaten the Earth, and Godzilla arrives to stop it. However, devoid of the camp often associated with those films, and given a shiny new coat of paint only the American movie industry can afford, this formulaic and simple premise is given new life, injected with a sense of believability and realism that makes it immensely accessible for newcomers, while also being endearingly affectionate enough for older fans to appreciate.
Sammy. Mommy, look! Dinosaurs!
By far the most striking thing about Godzilla is the immense scale director Gareth Edwards brings to the picture. Perhaps more so than any other film of its kind, the monsters here feel truly enormous, with almost every shot framed in such a way that effectively conveys the imposing stature of beasts so large they don't even notice mankind's existence. This framework makes the film feel epic in a way few films are, spanning multiple countries and cities while also remaining focused on the human perspective on the ground. This is to say that the film is as intimate as it is epic, never indulging in destruction for its own sake, making for a more restrained action blockbuster, the kind that is increasingly rare to come by these days. Indeed, it may come as a surprise to some just how long it takes for the mayhem to get going. The mystery of the Mutos is an intriguing setup, and made all the more effective by having it anchored in the context of a family whom they've torn apart. Aaron Taylor Johnson is better than people give him credit for as Ford Brody, a soldier trained by past trauma to keep his emotions in check and do his duty even in the face of monstrous odds. Elizabeth Olsen plays his wife, Elle, an equally dutiful mother tasked with protecting her son amidst the turmoil. She isn't given much to do, but Olsen is naturally sympathetic in the role. The always reliable Ken Watanabe brings the invaluable Japanese perspective as Dr. Ishiro Serizawa, the one person who sees Godzilla as the solution instead of the problem. Sally Hawkins, David Strathairn, and Juliette Binoche round out the cast, but it is Bryan Cranston who captures your attention as Ford's father, Joe Brody, a man trapped in the past by grief. His performance is unsurprisingly magnetic, making the story immediately engaging.
Something killed my wife, and I have a right to know!
Once the monsters are unleashed, however, Godzilla gets going and never stops, relishing in the art of tension and suspense. Every set piece builds upon the last until it reaches a crescendo made up of the kind of classic kaiju conflict the franchise has been known for. The film's first proper introduction of Godzilla, a 10-minute long sequence in Hawaii, is a masterclass of escalation meant to maximize its impact. The film is full of these types of sequences, and all of them are different in significant ways, adding tons of variety to the action. Aided by special effects so good you don't notice them, incredible sound design that perfectly sells the size of the monsters, and a pounding soundtrack by composer Alexander Desplat, Godzilla becomes the kind of action movie you use to show off your entertainment system. For the first time in years, Godzilla is a hero in this film, albeit a apathetic one who pays no mind to the humans scurrying beneath his feet. This was a surprise to many at the time, but in hindsight, an appropriate choice. Despite his limited screen time, Godzilla oozes personality, a fact aided by a design that perfectly adapts him for the modern age, balancing a need for realism with faithfulness to the past. While kind of bland, the Mutos make for an interesting and oddly sympathetic antagonistic force. Unlike many of Godzilla's enemies, these creatures aren't treated as purposefully malevolent, but instead are treated as animals just doing what animals do. This further contributes to the film's intentions to treat the concept of Godzilla as realistically as possible, while still adhering to the fantasy inherent to it that makes it so appealing. Godzilla 2014 has some major blemishes though that keep it from being perfect. The film makes a huge mistake by killing off Bryan Cranston's character in the first act. Since his performance is arguably the emotional heart of the film, his absence is immediately felt and abruptly disengages you from the narrative that up until that point had been so engaging. And while it is admirable that the film strives for restraint and the art of the slow build, it teases the audience one too many times for its own good. It eventually gets to the point of legitimate frustration, which will leave some a bit dissatisfied when it's all said and done. Even with these flaws, the 2014 Godzilla is a triumph as far as reboots and adaptations are concerned. As a Godzilla movie meant to appeal to mass audiences, it succeeds while also being a proper original blockbuster of its own. It adheres to the classic Godzilla formula while still doing its own thing, and does so in a way that properly sells the scope and scale a kaiju movie with a $100 million plus budget ought to have. It's a highly entertaining, surprisingly restrained, and extremely respectful adaptation that Godzilla fans can accept with open arms. For more reviews and opinions on all things Godzilla, subscribe and stay tuned to Up From the Depths. In 2014, Legendary Pictures announced that they were working with Universal Pictures to make a King Kong prequel simply titled Skull Island that would go beyond the original story and dig deeper into the mythology of Kong's home. However, following the success of the 2014 American Godzilla film, the two studios made a deal with Warner Brothers, and the script was rewritten to explicitly connect the two films into a bigger cinematic universe, and to set up another potential meeting between Godzilla and Kong in the future. To direct the film, the studio hired young American filmmaker Jordan Vogt Roberts, who had made a splash with his independent coming-of-age film The Kings of Summer. And so, sporting an all-star cast, Kong Skull Island was released in early 2017, becoming the first film to finally step out of the shadow of the original and add new dimensions to cinema's oldest giant monster. The year is 1973, and just as the Vietnam War is drawing to a close, satellite imagery has revealed a legendary island shrouded in fog called Skull Island. Seeing a last opportunity to prove his theories correct, head of the U.S. branch of Monarch, Bill Randa, assembles a military-led expedition to the island, where they discover a massive bipedal ape named Kong, who attacks, leaving them stranded and forced to fend for themselves against the island's many other nasty beasts. Luckily for them, they encounter Hank Marlowe, a U.S. soldier who has befriended the natives and has been living on the island since World War II. With only 3 days to reach a rendezvous point and escape, the group must trek across the island, all while evading the man-eating skull crawlers, all with the hope that the island's protector Kong will fight them off and protect them. Kong Skull Island is exactly the type of film the franchise needed at the time it came out. After decades of remakes, homages, and half-baked sequels, this film finally sees Kong come into his own, growing beyond being a tragic lovesick figure into a hero monster the audience can root for. In accomplishing this, the film becomes an action-packed old-school creature feature of the highest order, done on a massive budget and supported with an A-list cast, and all of it is presented with a real sense of panache and visual flair by director Jordan Vogt Roberts, making for a vibrant, fun, and gloriously over-the-top blockbuster that both fans of the original and newcomers alike can enjoy. Indeed, Kong Skull Island's greatest accomplishment is how it modernizes a classic character while still maintaining the feel of a classic monster movie. Unlike previous Kong films, this film wastes little time getting to the island, which does make the first act feel rushed and underdeveloped. But the film knows what you're here to see, and once the characters make it to the island, all hell breaks loose. And from that point forward, it is one fast-paced romp from one excellent set piece to the next. The film benefits from having a cheeky self-awareness that lends it a dark, humoristic edge. It's surprisingly brutal and relishes in seeing the cast get gobbled up one by one.
Oh God, fuck!
It's no surprise that the weakest link is the human characters, which are all well cast but one-dimensional. Most exist just to provide the film with a body count, with some, such as John Goodman, feeling criminally wasted, while others seemingly exist for no reason at all. With all that said, this is a great cast, and they work well with what little material they are given. The best performance is John C. Reilly as Hank Marlowe, the World War II pilot stranded on Skull Island for 20 years. He is simultaneously the film's greatest source of comic relief and its emotional heart, and Reilly is a natural at conveying both, making him the closest thing the film has to a main character. The only other real standout is Samuel L. Jackson, who is absolutely in his element as Colonel Packard, a man who cast all his angst about the Vietnam War onto Kong. You can actually understand where he's coming from, making him a great human antagonist to root against. Tom Hiddleston and Brie Larson make for fine leads, but they exist mostly to look good during the many action sequences. Toby Kebbell, Shea Wiggum, Jason Mitchell, and Corey Hawkins round out the cast, among many others, and they all have just enough moments to stand out so that you care at least a little when they die.
Oh dear.
Of course, the real main star is Kong, and here he is done better than ever before. The film sticks close to the original design while beefing up and updating him to fit into the film's modern aesthetic, making for a perfect blend of old and new. The execution is also incredibly good, using a combination of CGI animation and motion capture to bring to life a younger, more immature Kong. But a good hero needs a good villain, and the Skullcrawlers fit the bill quite well. The fights between the two are brutal, well choreographed, and presented in glorious daylight, allowing you to fully take in every gorgeously realized second. From an overall production standpoint, Kong Skull Island also impresses. Much of the movie was filmed in the actual jungles of Vietnam, which goes a long way towards making Skull Island feel like a real, tangible place, while also creating a distinct look that differentiates it from past versions. Jordan Vogt Roberts' direction is really sharp, crafting some truly beautiful shots that capture the awe and majesty of Kong in ways never seen before. And while the music by Henry Jackman is a little on the bland side, it does contain a few memorable themes, and is supplemented by some classic tunes of the era that sets the mood perfectly. Kong Skull Island excels at exactly what it set out to be, a classic monster romp that finally breaks Kong free from the shackles of the original while still paying homage to it. Sure, the characters are fairly stagnant, as they often are with these movies, but they all stand out and are performed by a great cast. But the film knows you're watching for the monsters, and it delivers. It is chock full of tons of cool creatures that monster lovers are sure to go crazy over. The film is just fun from beginning to end. There's really no other way to describe it. It's not high art, but it doesn't aspire to be, and there's nothing wrong with that. As far as modern day creature features go, this is one of the best. For more reviews and opinions on all things King Kong, subscribe and stay tuned to Up From the Depths. With the 2014 Godzilla film being both a critical and financial success, Warner Bros. And Legendary Pictures immediately announced that there would be a sequel, shortly after which they dropped the bombshell that Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah would be making appearances as well. Taking the place of Gareth Edwards as director was Michael Dougherty, a genre filmmaker known for his cult hits Trick or Treat and Krampus. Together with his co-screenwriter Zach Shields, he was tasked with crafting a story that would build the world of Warner Bros. MonsterVerse while at the same time paving the way for the upcoming rematch between Godzilla and King Kong. And so after a long 5-year wait, Godzilla King of the Monsters finally hit theaters in May 2019. An epic, action-packed film that, for both better and for worse, faithfully embraces and translates the franchise's often eccentric storytelling style for general audiences. 5 years after the presence of Godzilla and other titans have been revealed to the world, the monster hunting organization Monarch has discovered and contained numerous creatures across the globe. Following the completion of a device that allows humans to communicate with the titans, Dr. Emma Russell and her daughter Madison are kidnapped by eco-terrorist Alan Jonah, who begins freeing the titans to save the Earth from mankind's destructive actions. With the help of Madison's father Mark, Monarch sets out to stop him, but not before he awakens Mothra, Rodan, and worst of all, the ultimate alpha, King Ghidorah, who challenges Godzilla for supremacy of planet Earth. In many ways, Godzilla King of the Monsters feels like a deliberate course correction in response to the criticisms of its predecessor. While the 2014 film relished in taking its time, this film hops from one epic set piece to another at breakneck speed. The kaiju are clearly the focus here, and while this will no doubt satisfy those who felt that the last film skimped out on the monster mayhem, it does come at the expense of a truly great story worthy of being invested in. Thankfully, everything involving the monsters is top-notch, and the joy comes from seeing these classic characters being given the kind of big-budget treatment many fans have longed to see. It must be stressed how well realized the creatures of King of the Monsters really are. Modern computer effects are used to bring Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, and Ghidorah to life in ways they never have been before, imbuing them with nuanced behaviors and quirks that subtly develop their characters without anthropomorphizing them too much. All 4 Monstars are designed wonderfully and given their moments to shine, updated to fit within the tone and style of this series of films while still remaining remarkably faithful to the originals. And while the mythology and alliances are shifted somewhat, it's nothing Toho themselves haven't done before, and in this case are actually quite inspired, making these creatures feel fresh despite how old they actually are. The only downside is that much of the time the monsters are shrouded in darkness and weather effects, which works for dramatic and narrative purposes, but still, there are times when you wish things would clear up so you can get a better look at them. In genre tradition, King of the Monsters has a rather large cast of characters, each of whom contribute their small part to the ensemble, and while no one is necessarily bad, many aren't given much to do and get lost in the shuffle. This is kind of a shame because many are played by great character actors, and part of the fun is seeing these big names act out in a legit Godzilla movie plot. Ken Watanabe's Dr. Serizawa is a welcomed return, the human representation and reminder of the franchise's beating heart. Thomas Middleditch, Bradley Whitford, and Ziyi Zhang round out the cast, among many others, but the film is mostly focused on the Russell family, played by Vera Farmiga, Kyle Chandler, and Millie Bobby Brown respectively, and to whom your mileage may vary. Like the 2014 film, their family drama is the least compelling aspect of the film, and feels kind of forced amidst all the more pressing global-scale drama going on around them.
This won't bring him back to us.
Chances are, though, you'll be too enthralled by the spectacle to be too bothered by the more cliched aspects of the story. King of the Monsters certainly isn't lacking in action, as rarely a scene goes by without a monster appearing on screen, and there are many a moments that are likely to give fans goosebumps. Michael Dougherty's direction is fast and ferocious, and his screenplay plays it straight with a knowing wink to the audience, peppering in many homages and callbacks, some of which are thrown in with the subtlety of a hammer. Perhaps the best thing about the film, though, is the soundtrack by composer Bear McCreary. His original score is great in and of itself, but it's his reuse of the classic Godzilla and Mothra themes that are the icing on the cake, and are enough to make any fan squeal with joy. Ultimately, Godzilla King of the Monsters is a really fun, high-octane thrill ride that doesn't have too much to offer beyond that, and that's just fine. While it plays around with religious and environmental themes, it's very surface level, only serving to contextualize the monster action and little more. But for those who love monsters, especially these particular characters, that will be more than enough. All 4 of the main stars are treated like the cinematic titans they are, each of them given moments of striking visual beauty that stick with you and may well become iconic down the line. It does risk alienating those who aren't quite as enthusiastic about the kaiju genre, but it could be argued that this film wasn't made for them. This is a big budget Hollywood Godzilla film made for fans by fans, and while there is a sense that it could be better, taken for what it is, it's a worthy sequel to the 2014 film, and more than a worthy entry into this historically long-running franchise. For more reviews and opinions on all things Godzilla, subscribe and stay tuned to Up From the Depths. In the summer of 2014, Legendary Pictures announced the production of a new original King Kong movie, to be distributed by Universal Studios. However, seeing the success of the 2014 Godzilla film, maneuvers were made behind the scenes to move the Kong film from Universal to Warner Brothers, bringing the 2 franchises under one roof. Titled Kong Skull Island, the film, released in 2017, was revamped into a prequel that would become the first act of a multi-film universe that would bring the 2 iconic monsters together for the first time since the 1960s. And so after the release of another Godzilla film titled King of the Monsters in 2019, the stage was officially set for Godzilla vs. Kong, which after many delays was finally released in March of 2021, giving fans the rematch they've been clamoring for decades. 5 years after Godzilla saved the Earth from King Ghidorah, he suddenly attacks an Apex Cybernetics facility in Florida, seemingly declaring war on humanity. In response, head of Apex Walter Simmons recruits disgraced scientist Nathan Lind to head an expedition into the Hollow Earth to obtain an immensely powerful energy source that could be used to fight back. Dr. Lind requests Kong, now a captive on Skull Island under the supervision of Dr. Eileen Andrews, to be used to both escort and protect this expedition, believing the Hollow Earth to be his original home. Meanwhile, Madison Russell, having been saved by Godzilla in the past, believes him to be innocent, and recruits the help of a conspiracy podcaster and a high school friend to investigate further. However, as soon as Kong leaves Skull Island, an unusually angry Godzilla follows, triggering an ancient rivalry that could determine the fate of the world. Godzilla vs. Kong is a film that absolutely delivers on the promise of its title. For those who can't help but feel giddy at the prospect of seeing Godzilla and Kong duke it out on the scale only a massive Hollywood budget can afford, you will come out immensely satisfied, and perhaps even feeling like a kid again. Those looking for a little something more, however, will likely find the film severely lacking in the elements that makes for a genuinely engaging narrative, which has been stripped down to its bare essentials in an effort to get to the titular fight as fast as possible. This works in that regard, as it takes barely any time at all before Godzilla and Kong are trading blows, but this comes at the expense of a truly compelling story. The result is a monstrously entertaining but ultimately hollow experience that should satiate certain audiences looking to get their fill of kaiju carnage and nothing more. And get their thrill they will, because for all its myriad of issues, Godzilla vs. Kong gives the people what they want, namely a rock'em sock'em rumble between the 2 greatest monsters of cinema, and everything having to do with that is exquisitely done. All the monster action is clearly shot and beautifully choreographed, while still maintaining the sense of scale that is so important to making these movies feel huge. What also works to the film's benefit is its embrace of the absurd. This is an unabashedly silly movie, offering gorgeous visuals that relish in nothing but pure imagination, the kind that is sure to get kids' heads racing with possibilities. And so when viewed this way, it's hard to be too cynical about it. Still, there's simply no denying that, even more so than previous films in the MonsterVerse, the actual story and the human cast that supports it is utterly devoid of any depth. Great actors such as Rebecca Hall, Alexander Skarsgård, Damian Bashir, and Brian Tyree Henry are given nothing to do but react and spout inane dialogue that simply pushes the plot along. Millie Bobby Brown reprises her role from King of the Monsters, but she too is wasted in a B-plot that is mildly interesting at best. The closest the film gets to having genuine human emotion comes from Gia, a deaf Iwi native with whom Kong shares a bond with. She is the MVP of the movie, elevated by a great performance by the young and talented Kaylee Hottle. The heart of the movie, however, belongs to Kong. He is the real star and the true main character, and when viewed in this way, Godzilla vs. Kong is fairly compelling. The effects used to bring this character to life are incredible, imbuing him with a real sense of soul that makes you care for him regardless of which monster you're the bigger fan of. This gives the fights a genuine sense of tension, as Kong is consistently presented as the underdog against the more powerful Godzilla. Naturally, all this attention on Kong does take some of the narrative focus away from the King of the Monsters, but he is still a constant presence in the movie, and it's never too long before he shows up on screen. In fact, it's refreshing to see this iteration of Godzilla return to his more villainous roots, and he does things you've never seen him do before. Ultimately, Godzilla vs. Kong is satisfying in the sense that it delivers on a rematch 60 years in the making, but also frustrating in that it doesn't offer much else beyond that. It has no pretensions beyond being pure spectacle of the highest order, which is both a strength and a weakness. It is incredibly fast-paced, never slowing down to let you dwell on anything too deeply, which has the odd effect of making the film feel less epic despite it having been designed to be a culmination of the prior films. It is mostly devoid of substance, though there is some interesting narrative stuff going on with the monsters if you look hard enough for it. Still though, there is no denying that when this movie fires, it fires on all cylinders, offering up some of the coolest visuals and most thrilling action of both monsters' respective franchises. They are the real stars, they have the most character, and so when they are on screen, which is often, the film is a blast that your inner child can't help but love, flaws and all. For more reviews and opinions on all things Godzilla and Kong, subscribe and stay tuned to Up From the Depths.